Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's a Ukrainian show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Starr, and I have today Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, John.
Oh, thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here.
Great to have you. And our own Ivan Kucherenko from Ukraine, Kiev, capital of free Ukraine. Welcome to the show, Ivan.
Hello, Sasha. Hi, Jonathan. Hi, everyone.
So we are living through a very exciting time. Finally, the Ukrainian attack is now going all the way through, and it's smashing this Russian positions near Bakhmut, and is doing tremendously well. And now Prigozhin no longer can complain that he didn't have enough ammunition, and something went wrong here or there. It's now all becoming clear. Where are all these Russian thugs and criminals, and where the army of free Ukraine is going ahead? Ivan, what you've heard the latest?
Yeah, it's happening. What Jonathan said, reconnaissance in force, actually, because someone says that Ukrainian attack has begun even a couple weeks ago, but there are no major breakthrough through Russian front lines. And like a skilled boxer, where just Ukrainian army are just examining and trying to find the weakest positions where then most powerful strike will be initiated. And this reconnaissance near Bakhmut shows that Russians are completely unprepared for the upcoming attack.
It was more direct than they expected.
Yeah.
They found success. Yeah.
The forces are weakened, and obviously, Ukrainian attack will be successful.
And the beautiful thing about the reconnaissance in force is that it's flexible enough. If you meet significant resistance, you can stop your reconnaissance in force rather than to fully commit. In this case, what the Ukrainians found was that the Russians were exhausted and on the verge of collapse, and the reconnaissance in force met with unexpected success, and so they exploited that. They reinforced it, and it's not necessarily the main attack because they still have enough in reserve being developed to launch a more decisive punch should the current effort in Bakhmut slow down any. But as it turns out, the Russian forces are falling back, and this will should open the opportunity for further successes in other areas of the battlefield.
Very well said, Jonathan, exactly. And I'm afraid the Russians will not have enough time to pick up some washing machines and refrigerators. They will not.
No, unfortunately, they've take care about it in advance. They robbed Ukrainian homes all the time when they occupied territories, and those news we received from the occupied territories show that the Russians here are doing their loved things. They are robbing, they're drinking, and now they're evacuating their occupation administrations before the Ukrainian attack will definitely leave them no time to take the stuff they robbed with them.
In my opinion, the biggest proof of absolutely collapse of Russian society is the behavior of their women. Because, okay, the men, they're drunks, they will die sooner or later. The life expectancy of men in Russia is something like 58 years Oh,
It's
that's so.
really appalling.
Yeah, it's a mess completely. But women, it was a backbone of Russian society through centuries. And now look at what's happened. The wives of Russian soldiers, they phoned them through cell phones. That's how Ukrainians learned about it. And they said, okay, you'd have to take television set. Don't forget this washer dry machine. Take toaster. Don't forget that. And you know what? You can have fun with Ukrainian girls, but just don't tell me about it, okay? This is Russian women, the backbone of society. Look how far they go below the surface. They're becoming savages. Here is another example. One woman in one of the Russian cities, forgot which one, doesn't matter. She had a husband who was um, had to go through a mobilization process, so he didn't want to do it. So he was in hiding, but she knew where he was. So she went and talked on him and disclosed where he's hiding and so on. So next day he went to Ukraine, and her motivation was actually two motivations. One, that if he will be killed, she will get 5 million rubles. Although these days I think they're not paying 5 million rubles anymore. They're paying much less money if the pay. They asked to bring all kind of supporting documentation and so on. So they're trying to avoid paying anything. But at least there is a hope to get something. And number two, which is much more viable than that, is that she is now becoming owner of the apartment. So her husband will be killed there, and hopefully sooner rather than later, and she's becoming owner of all apartment. So this is the devious action on behalf of uh, today's modern Russian woman who used to be a backbone of society and becoming savage, becoming just human garbage, just same as their men. Unfortunately, but that's a way of now. And I would like to bring your attention again to continued discussions about what to do Russian people in Europe, those who moved to Europe recently or not so recently, how they can justify, even if they're against the invasion, they're against Putin, but still, because of their Russian background, they're viewed as second sort people in the West. So, how to deal with this contradiction? And it's a very difficult question. It's being argued by people like Mikhail Khodorkovsky, Gary Kasparov, so very prominent people. And somebody who is a very, very talented writer and he's a very prominent lawyer and he's teaching at London University College, Mr. Pastukhov. I like his suggestion because he's Russian as well. Also, he lives in London for many, many years now, but he's Russian. And you see, and he said, the best thing for Russians is to shut up and don't open your mouth while this war is on, because doesn't matter what you're gonna say. If you are Russian, you are part of the criminal state. It means that you are together with Putin, even if you don't openly support him. Just shut up. That's what Mr. Pastukov said, and I think that's far the best advice what he could suggest. What do you think, Ivan?
Yeah, I agree. I don't know him, but I agree with these words because it's not, as we've discussed on our previous show and in that video I showed, that this war is not Putin's war. Unfortunately, it's a war or majority of Russians who live in modern world thinking about their imperial past, and they see Russia as mighty imperialistic country which conquers other countries, which shows the whole world its power, which confronts the United States, with the Europe, and so on. And what is very strange in this behavior is that those Russian population, they even don't think that the money which Russia actually spends on this war, on their foreign policy, on bribing the Western politicians who support them, on bribing the governments of other countries to make them allies. If Russia put those money into inside, and at least they could build roads in their villages and put electricity there, so Russian soldiers will not be so surprised when they come to Ukraine and see that in Ukrainian villages there are roads, there is electricity, that in every Ukrainian village house there is a washing machine, a refrigerator, the toilet is not only outside, and they're really surprised how Ukraine is living so good, while how Ukrainians living so good, while most majority of Russians, they don't have such civilization attitudes. The civilization in Russia ends after the Moscow, on the borders of Moscow, St. Petersburg, maybe a couple of other cities. But actually, I have a really interesting video for today, and it's not. Yeah, and it's not about Putin. It's not about Russia. It's actually not about this war. It's about something else. But after we will watch this video, we will discuss what is similar with the current situation. So, Mark, please launch the video.
Excellent. Thank you, Ivan.
Mad Dog of the Middle East was the nickname given to the Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi. He morphed from a favorite into an enemy of his people. Throughout history, the International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for only 3 incumbent heads of state. They are Omar al-Bashir, Muammar Gaddafi, and Vladimir Putin. Unfortunately, Gaddafi did not have time to stand trial because his own people killed him. The Libyan people idolized their leader when Gaddafi came to power after overthrowing the monarchy. He managed to build a robust social support system that raised the living standard of ordinary Libyans. But over time, Gaddafi turned into a tyrant. He obliterated freedom of speech, banned strikes and demonstrations, and introduced censorship in the press. Prisons were stuffed, and his political rivals began to go missing, with at least 15 Libyan opposition figures found dead in Europe. Gaddafi's regime became increasingly brutal and bloody. This dictator was notorious for his strange behavior. After hunting, he washed his hands in the blood of the animals he murdered. Also, he used to hire only chaste women called the Amazonian Guard to bodyguard him. Only after Gaddafi's death did it become known that he abused and raped them. Libya had influence thanks to its oil. Muammar Gaddafi sought to create a single Arab African country on the continent that would surpass the USA. He financed separatist movements such as the Irish Republican Army, the ETA, and Palestinian nationalism. The Libyan Special Services organized a terrorist attack at a disco in Berlin, which was frequented by American soldiers. Later, Pan Am Flight 103 from London to New York exploded in the sky over Scotland, killing 270 people. This terrorist attack was followed by the next one on UTA Flight 772 from Brazzaville to Paris, in which 170 people died. Libya falls under severe sanctions, and Gaddafi admits that his country was involved in these terrorist attacks. He pays compensation to the relatives of the dead, and the world decided that this punishment was enough. Gaddafi begins to travel a lot around the world. and receives Western guests in his mobile Bedouin tent, but forgets about his own country, whose population has accumulated a lot of claims against their ruler for 42 years. At first, Gaddafi manages to suppress protests by force. He exterminates entire villages of dissenters. NATO supports the rebels, thus protecting the civilian population. Gaddafi flees around the country but gets caught in an airstrike, after which the rebels detain and kill him. He considered himself a true patriot who strove to make Libya great, but he did not notice how he had usurped power. He could not stop in time, which is why the Libyans executed him. After the assassination, the bodies of Muammar Gaddafi and his son were put on public display in a shopping mall industrial freezer in Misrata.
Very powerful video. His fate reminds me somebody.
And there is an opinion, actually, I've heard that Putin, first of all, considered Gaddafi his friend. And when Gaddafi was killed by his own people, it frightened Putin so much that he decided to use any possible means, any possible power to stay at power and not to allow any so-called color revolutions to appear in Russia. That's why he was so angry on Ukraine with the Ukrainian Maidan revolution of dignity, and that's why actually Putin considered Ukraine to be his major threat of his power in Russia, because if Ukraine succeeded to throw away dictator Yanukovych, then Russian people in meantime could do the same. Looking how Ukraine is evolving under democratic government, and then obviously Putin will follow the way of Gaddafi. So that's why actually that's the only reason why Putin started this war. Not he was not afraid of NATO going to the borders of Russia, and now Finland and Sweden are joining NATO, and it comes very close to the borders of Russia. Actually, just look at on Putin as on a regular person, not a super powerful dictator, but regular person who sits besides the very long table, who have a lot of doublers, who doesn't allow anyone to come close to him, and it actually shows that he's just a small person who is afraid of being executed, like was executed his friend Muammar Gaddafi.
Actually, for many years, documentary "The Last Days of Gaddafi" was Putin's favorite movie, and he saw it almost every evening just to maybe alert himself, or he just enjoys watching violence. It's hard to say, but it was maybe still is one of his favorite movies. I saw a few days ago on Netflix documentary by the name "Winter on Fire." It's absolutely fantastic documentary about the Maidan of 2013-14, and it's so well done. It shows millions of people. It shows the magnitude of this movement, and all those Russian stories that it was American inspired, and they made Ukrainians to go to Maidan to inflict bad things on Putin and so on. This is such lies, that were repeated in Russia for many, many years, and it has nothing whatsoever to do with reality. And I would recommend everybody to watch this movie on Netflix. Um, Jonathan, what do you think about this regions of this war and any justification for Putin to do? Because there was an article which I just read before our program. Do you know the Thomas Friedman, well-known journalist? And the name of this article is "Putin is the world's most dangerous fool." What it is.
Well, well, don't hold back. Tell us how he really feels. Uh, but in any case, uh, Putin is just is an absolutely no-win situation here. He cannot justify. Well, he no longer has much of an offensive threat with which, other than this nuclear arsenal, which is kind of problematic, with which to threaten Ukraine in the West. And there has been some speculation, in fact, that the Russian nuclear arsenal may be in fact, so flawed because nuclear arsenals require a great deal of maintenance and upkeep. And it is an open question. Is there really a reliable nuclear arsenal for Putin to use? Or will it prove to be just like the rest of the military, flawed and inoperable when the time really comes, when push comes to shove? I think that Putin is trying to cut his losses as much as possible. And if the Ukrainian reconnaissance in force, which has proved more successful than expected, the initial reconnaissance in force, if that develops into a full-blown counteroffensive when Ukraine finally decides to throw its main punch, and I could see the Ukrainian armed forces driving Russia out of the occupied areas in Ukraine and sealing off the Crimea. In which case, it's only a matter of time before the Crimea drops into Ukrainian hands, just like an apple falling off a tree.
By default, yeah, yeah.
By default, yeah.
So, yeah,
They won't have to fight for it; they'll surrender.
John, speaking about maintenance for all this nuclear weapons forces, most of the people involved in actual maintenance, there are Ukrainians, because Ukrainians knew exactly how to construct these missiles, and they were very good at maintaining. And Russians, at first, when Ukrainians remitted their nuclear arsenal in 1994, they asked very specifically Ukraine to provide the maintenance workers, not only for their arsenal, but for others as well.
Yeah, the Ukrainians said that they had administrative control over the Russian nuclear forces in Ukraine, and which meant that while they couldn't necessarily use them themselves, they could prevent them from being used, or maybe even. So that's quite an accomplishment. So I would say that nuclear threat is becoming less and less credible, and Western intelligence sources may well be able to figure out just how ineffective Russian nuclear forces actually
are. And
you
notice it very interesting thing that for so many years now, almost 30 years, Russians never were interested to learn actually how to maintain these weapons or so on. And you know why? There is no money in it. Russians want to easy money. They want to steal something. They want to have some kind of gold or oil.
Well, the price they may be paying for that in their nuclear forces, they may have what is in fact a hollow nuclear force.
And I think it's one of the reasons why they didn't want to do any treaties with the United States, because it would involve inspection of both sides would inspect.
And the United States would find out.
So
the United States would find out, hey, these nuclear forces aren't worth a darn. Yeah, so that could well be the case. So,
I think so.
in any case, which still, as I've recommended before, what the U.S. and NATO should do if, at the conclusion of this war, and at least start thinking about it before the war is even ended, the creation of that global ballistic missile defense force,
Agree.
which would put that would just put the drive a stake through the heart of any pretensions that Russia or China or any other would-be nuclear powers would have. If you have the capability to neutralize their nuclear arsenals, that is what I call a no-kill strategy. Not a single human being dies from a ballistic missile defense force. It only threatens the weapons of the aggressor. And that is the
Brilliant.
way we should go. That's
I
the way we should
And
go.
agree.
actually, the recent successful destroy of Ukrainian hypersonic missile Kinjal over Kiev using Patriot air defense system shows
There's the
that
it's possible.
that it's exactly possible to defend cities against the Russian so-called undestroyable missiles, and really
And
in
you
that
know that
case,
ballistic missile defense forces are what Finland is going to want. They're going to want them based on their territory. Sweden's going to want them. The Baltic states are all going to want ballistic missile defense force, as well as Ukraine, once you get them into NATO. All of those easternmost nations closest to Russia will be logically the ones who most want and need to have credible ballistic missile defense forces, and preferably with Americans manning those for helping man those forces as a symbolic American presence in the eastern part of NATO, which would act as the most powerful deterrent to any future Russian aggression, because any attack against any of those countries with American forces stationed in them automatically would involve Russia in war with the United States, which is the last thing that Russia would want. So there is a path forward here to peace. There is a path forward here to lasting military and political stability in NATO and Europe. But we simply have to have the political will to pursue this to its logical conclusion, which means final defeat of Russian military forces in Ukraine and sealing off those forces in Crimea. And once we isolate them, then it only becomes a matter of time, contrary to some of the expectations of military observers in the West.
Yeah, yeah. Totally agree with you. Don't forget that although everybody wants peace in Europe and United States, and of course in Ukraine, there is only one man in this world who doesn't want a peace. It's Mr. Putin, because the peace is lethal to him. He's not going to survive any peace. He must fight until the end of his days, which hopefully will come soon. And with that, I would like to thank you very much for today's program and hope to have even better news next week on Tuesday. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye bye.
thank you, bye.
Thank you.